So socialization is something you may read about or hear about in an introductory psychology class or a social psychology class, human development maybe. Socialization is the process of the helpless infant becoming self-aware and knowledgeable. If you want a kind of quick and dirty definition, it's social learning. Social learning. A lot of the time when we talk about socialization, we're talking about kids and childhood socialization, because we know that the first so many years of life, we learn a lot about our culture, and like sponges, we absorb rules and norms, and among those rules and norms are how to act as a man or a woman. During socialization, children learn the ways of their elders, and through this they learn their values and norms and how to behave. So unless we are raised by wolves, we all go through a socialization process. And in fact, I think thinking about being raised by wolves is a good way of getting a handle on the socialization process. So this is the so-called wolf boy of southern France, and he was speaking in only shrill sounds. He was screaming. He had no sense of personal hygiene, and they would try to dress him, and he would immediately tear off the clothes. And interestingly, he had really no sense of self, and so you would hold up a mirror to him, and he would be terrified by the mirror. No parents came forward to claim him, and so he became a kind of scientific object. And so numerous studies were done on the wolf boy. And physically, he was fine. He was mature and developed, but he had no sense of social norms. So he was going to the bathroom whenever, wherever he pleased. He didn't have a sense of himself, again, as an autonomous person. And despite a large effort made to educate him, his vocabulary was rudimentary because he had missed out on those key developmental years where infants absorb a lot of their cognitive and speaking skills. So children need to be taught a language. They need to be taught acceptable behavior, how to walk, how to be toilet trained, and so on. And if a person is socialized, then they've accepted those norms and they've kind of internalized it. So we can think of a continuum of the wolf boy at one end, completely unsocialized, and a kind of conformist at the other end who always does what he or she is told. A lot of socialization, again, occurs in early infancy. And most theories of child development suggest that, like the wolf boy, babies have no real distinct understanding of objects or persons in their environment as individual objects, which is why the peekaboo game is effective, which is why you can hide and reappear. The first couple years of life, and this is terrain that most sociologists, we just let the psychologist examine this, but it's important for understanding socialization. The first 2 years of life, we develop linguistic skills, language skills, and it's largely unconscious. We're not, a lot of the learning doesn't occur through book learning, like we are when we're in 7th grade, but it occurs kind of through a process of osmosis, where we look around us and we imitate and then we learn. The primary agents of socialization, that is, the people responsible for turning us into normal humans, tend to be parents or caregivers. So the child is socialized primarily by parents, but when that child goes to school, their teachers become an agent of socialization. When they turn on the Teletubbies, the mass media becomes part of their socialization process. So socialization is the whole package of social learning that occurs. So if we think about socialization and those movie clips, we can see that a certain social learning is going on in each. It was a foregone conclusion in her conversation with the counselor that she would become married. Maybe she would work for a couple years after she got out of college. But it was assumed that not only would she get married, but she would assume the responsibility for keeping house and sewing the clothes and purchasing the clothes and the food and so forth. Her occupational opportunities were presented to her in a very narrow way. And so we can imagine that conversation that she's having with the counselor who's saying, really, you should study home economics. It'll help you be a better homemaker. That's a form of specifically gender socialization. So she's learning how to be a proper woman in that context of the counselor's office. And then thousands of other young women watching Why Study Home Economics in junior high and high schools across the country also are socialized then. They get the message that they're to be a homemaker, maybe work a couple years, but really home economics is important. Contrast that with the life that is sprawling before Jack. At the end, why should you study science? There's that swelling music, and you get the sense that, man, if you study science, you can be a leader. You can be a leader of the country. And if we're going to get to the moon, if we're going to develop as a nation, we need scientists like you. And it's almost implicit that it's male. Gender socialization and gender norms have inertia. And so the women that were educated and the men that were educated in that era didn't see going and getting a PhD in electrical engineering or math or physics as even an option. And if it was an option, it was a socially unacceptable one. So we can think of those films as elements of socialization that are setting up a historical situation where we will find fewer women in the upper echelons of math and science, simply because they were bombarded with messages like the ones I showed you that suggested that their place was properly in the home, taking care of the kids.